we are way ahead.
Yeah.
Mumbai, we are in Mumbai, so Mumbai is almost in a lockdown phase, and it's very scary. So I was just talking to Professor Abu Sufyan on this, and the strain is different for sure. We're seeing more younger population in hospitals in the age group of 35 to 50 or so, presenting with much severe symptoms as such. That's requiring hospitalization in most of the cases. And even if that's not the case, I mean, you at least are knocked out for almost a week or so with high grade fever and stuff, which we did not see that in the first wave.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now,
So
can you see full screen now? Is that right?
no, it's still on a slide mode. You've stopped sharing, right? Okay.
There you go.
Yes. Fantastic. Good.
And Dr. Shriek, how many people are you expecting this evening?
We have almost 60 plus faculty that will be officially that are registered to on this
Wow.
FDP across India, and then plus additional guests are expected. The Dean of Technology, University of Mumbai, is probably planning to join, and we have a couple of other invited guests. And this is also streamed live on our YouTube channel that is
Mhm.
being watched by students at our campus. So just as a note for you, so this will be live streamed and this will go on our YouTube channel. So if there's something that you would want there to stay, let us know. We'll edit it. Or if totally not, then we'll keep it private so it's not open to all. So just a a note for you,
Yeah, I'll let you
so
know.
that
It should be
you don't have an
fairly
issue.
open.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. Great. Okay. Fine.
I think there's people
So
waiting to be let in. I think.
yeah, we're getting it. Yes.
I don't know if you can hear the background, but a massive storm just started. Tons of rain now. Yeah.
Really? Oh, not a good start for weekend. So, folks are at Lantern and other places working from home primarily. Are you still office partially
Primarily,
open?
no. I think we held our first meeting 2 weeks ago, and it was only partial people. A lot of
Okay,
people still remote.
okay, okay,
So I don't think our current plans are maybe to start sometime around June 15, more
okay.
kind of quote unquote back to normal.
Back to normal.
Well, I don't think there will be a full back to normal.
Yeah, yeah. Do you think this whole work from home is going to be a partial model going forward with companies would like to take in?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right?
Lowers the real estate burden,
Yeah,
increases flexibility, seems to make employees somewhat happier.
yeah, yeah.
I think for new companies, it can be somewhat of a challenge
Right, right.
in terms of building culture and
Yeah,
teamwork, especially. I think
yeah.
for companies with existing operations
Uh-huh.
or fairly defined workflows, I think it's great.
Okay.
But I think for where you're imagining new things and rely heavily on interdisciplinary,
Hmm.
you know, activity can be challenging. We
Yeah,
find it challenging
yeah.
sometimes.
It is. It is. It is. It could be essentially. I mean, there have been.
Productivity can be good. Productivity can be high because people can work at their best schedule. If they work best early mornings or late nights or hybrid or have to take care of the kids in the middle of the day,
Yeah,
it releases the stress of the clock, which is
absolutely.
really good, I think, for productivity. But it can be the flip side. It's not great for creativity.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Especially when you need teams together for some part of time and you just kind of cross collective intelligence, physical space has its own added advantage, I guess. So maybe something like a hybrid model going forward, I guess.
Yeah, I think so. I'm going to
Maybe.
try lights on.
So if you answer जैसे आते हैं तो we'll start it back, right? Start कर लेंगे.
Okay. So, shall I share the input of this slide? कैसा करते हैं?
रहने देते हैं इसको ही और आप अपना कुरान की आयत अपने तरफ से पढ़ लो.
Okay, fine.
Right? Okay, I think Professor Abu Sufyan, you can get started with the introductions and then we'll get started.
Okay. Maria, madam.
Yes, sir.
Professor Maria, please start the session.
Yes, sir. Assalamualaikum and a very warm good evening to everyone. I hope you have enjoyed and gained insights from yesterday's session. I, Lal Maria, Assistant Professor at School of Pharmacy of Anjuman Islam Kalsekar Technical Campus, New Panvel, extend my warm welcome to all dignitaries, resource persons, faculties, participants from different colleges across India to day 6 of 1 week AICTE-IST sponsored refresher program on multidisciplinary and translational drug development, artificial intelligence in healthcare. To start with, as a tradition of Anjum Islam, I call upon Professor Abu Sufyan Sheikh to recite and translate few verses from Holy Quran.
Sure. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يهدي به الله من اتبع رضوان سبل السلام ويخرجهم من الظلمات إلى النور بإذنه ويهدي بهم إلى صراط مستقيم. The translation of this verse from Holy Quran is: Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guides all those who seek his good pleasure to way of the peace, and he brings them out of the darkness by his will into the light and guides them to the straight way. Sadaqallahul Azim.
Mesmerizing. Yesterday, we had a brainstorming and engaging session conducted by Professor Pankaj, Professor Prasoon, and Mr. Sunny Desai on leveraging machine learning and chronic kidney disease. Going ahead, today we have very interesting session by dynamic personalities, Mr. Anand Mahurkar and Mr. Panna Sharma. May I call upon our Dean, Dr. Sharik Sayed, for a brief introduction of our first resource person of the session, Mr. Panna Sharma. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Professor Maria, for letting me to introduce Panna Sharma. So it's an honor and privilege for all of us here at Anjuman Kalsekar Technical Campus, School of Pharmacy, and on behalf of all the faculty participants from School of Engineering and Pharmacy who have come in all across from India. I would like to extend a very warm welcome to Panna here. It's an early morning for him, and he has really taken our time. I know he's a fairly busy person. So to briefly introduce him, Panna Sharma is the president and CEO and board member of Plant to Inform, and it's a clinical stage oncology biotech, which is using artificial intelligence and genomics to innovate the rescue, revitalization, and development of precision cancer therapeutics. And Lantern Pharma is focused on improving patient outcomes by using its proprietary AI platform, which is response algorithm for drug repositioning and rescue, RADAR, to rescue, revitalize, and develop abandoned or even failed cancer drugs, and to accelerate their development through precision trial that help identify patient groups more likely to respond in its pipeline of targeted therapies. So that's in very brief introduction to Panna Sharma. We're honored to have you, Panna, here. Oncology is very close to my heart. I've had an experience of working a couple of years in clinical development at Princeton, Bristol Myers Squibb in immunology space. So this is the topic is very close to my heart, and we all look forward to hearing from you on what just some exciting stuff that you've been doing at Lantern along with your team. So I hand it over to you, Panna, for starting the session. Over to you.
Dr. Sharik, thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for taking time this evening. I'll cover two major things today. One is I'll talk a little bit about Lantern and why we're in a very unique position. All of you that are on this Zoom meeting are in a very, very unique time in the development of medicines and drugs. We've never had so much data as we have today, and so much machine learning power, and also collaborations. I think this will fundamentally change the future of drug development to be cheaper, faster, more powerful, less risky. And I'll tell you a little bit about how we're doing it and give you some case studies. We are a publicly traded company, ticker symbol LTRN on NASDAQ. This is actually the third company I've taken public in my career, two in biotech, one in tech. Public markets in the US love innovation, and Lantern Pharma is seen as one of the big innovators in drug discovery. Before I start talking about Lantern, let me tell you a little bit about what I see, why we're positioned at this golden age today. So today there are big megatrends that are setting the stage for the transformation of drug development, which we all know is very expensive to develop new medicines and bring them to market, or to develop even new diagnostics, or even to develop breakthrough new devices. But what has changed and continues to change is today there's more large-scale, relevant and readily available data sets, real-world data sets that high school people can get their hands on. Cancer data is shared more freely. COVID data is shared more freely, not only in the types of people, but also the strains, the genetic information. And those data sets provide insight that has typically taken months or years to do, now can take seconds or even less than a few hours. There's methods and algorithms and technologies that are massively scalable. 4 or 5 years ago, for some of the algorithms we're doing today, would have taken several weeks. And before that, it could have even taken several months. Today, we can do these in a matter of hours. Computing and storage costs are continue to advance and go lower and lower. And this opens up a whole new ability to globalize drug development. Innovative new medicines have largely been made in first world countries, US, Europe, but now with the cost decreasing, and also the second thing, global talent and collaboration networks increasing. People are more comfortable collaborating across borders using global talent to tackle complex problems. And then finally, the tremendous increase in the quality of biological data and methods. We collect hundreds of millions of data points every quarter. Actually, I think now almost 1 billion every quarter. And the data that's coming out today from laboratories and from others is so much superior than data from 5 and 10 years ago. The ability to replicate it, the ability to understand the nuances of the data, and more importantly, the methods that are being used. And finally, one of the very important things, the rise of sequencing. Sequencing, at least in the US and in many countries, really is on demand, highly available, and it's really a service. You don't need $10, $15 million as you did 7, 8 years ago to build a sequencing center. My last company, we spent millions of dollars building, scaling, operating sequencing. And today you can just turn to any sequencing provider and get it on demand. And also consumers are willing to share personal data in a near time. Think about areas such as childhood sicknesses or monogenic disease or diabetes or chronic disorders. All this data now is collected in devices and watches or even on the internet. And then all that backdrop, something more important is happening, and that's investors and the industries themselves have an impetus to transform. We saw it first, obviously, in tech and in retail, going to e-tail and in shopping. We're now seeing COVID-19 accelerate that across many industries. But industries want to transform, and drug discovery is the same way. They're looking for reasons to change the way that they're doing business. And this is creating a new generation of investors that want to see this kind of innovation. So it used to be that executives and entrepreneurs, you didn't really get the same rewards for rapid change. Executives were rewarded not for change, but for maintaining really a high quality status quo, maintaining earnings, keeping things predictable. Entrepreneurs were rewarded for providing the next innovation that was needed to fill the gap. But for rapid change, this is now where drug discovery is, and it's never been at a better time. And many of you that will participate in this industry, hopefully will be able to collaborate. But we're at the forefront of this model, of this golden age of AI and medicine, where we are taking all the trends today and transforming value ultimately for cancer patients, and our investors and our employees will benefit also. So let me tell you a little bit about what we do. We are at the core of what we're doing is we're better predicting how a compound will work or not work in certain cancers. And so we have an engine called RADAR. It's 1.2 billion data points, genomic data, clinical data, response data, And all this data looks at the biomarkers and the drug sensitivity across hundreds and hundreds of different compounds that have been tried in cancer. And from there, we can better understand which compounds will work in what cancers. And then more importantly, we can understand the mechanism of action that leads us to launching a trial faster, being able to predict patient stratification approaches, and very importantly, reduce the risk and shorten the time to bringing a new medicine to market. And that's ultimately one of the most important things. Today, it takes about over $2 billion to bring a new cancer drug to market. It takes about 10 years. And there's a lot of data in the process, preclinical data, clinical data, studies, genomics, biomarker data. And trials that use biomarkers have had higher success rates. And so as we continue to use biomarker and genomics to predict what the outcome will be, this has captured a lot of attention in the industry. In fact, Fortune, we were featured in Fortune last year. And people are very interested, especially now that COVID-19 vaccines were developed in under a year. So this has captured the imagination of the media. And more importantly, there's tons of data now available for launching these efforts. The reason why this is really relevant is if you take a look at the ROI in the top 12 pharma, this is based on research that's done by Deloitte Consulting every year, the internal rate of return on their projects in 2019 was 1.8%. It's among the lowest it's ever been, much lower than their cost of capital. And the two big reasons that this ROI in cancer is so low for big pharma is two reasons. The strong therapeutic effect you see of a compound or a drug early on gets diluted in the specific patient population later on, so that lacks patient stratification. Second, there's so many genetic changes that are involved in cancer, and you need to exploit those genetic changes early on. And so the genetic changes and patient stratification are really the two most essential problems our platform solves. And this allows us to increase the potential for better clinical trial design, and also, more importantly, to have a faster, more efficient trial. If you take a look at where we are with RADAR today, we've done a lot to our portfolio. We've published on our platform. We have over 1.2 billion data points. We'll be growing that to over 3. We actually are thinking about setting up an operation in India sometime later this year or early next year to scale our data and data science team. So that's something, if some of you have an interest or insight in, I'd be happy to have some discussions. So what are the big drivers of value for us? When we went public in June of last year, we had 3 programs that we were developing. Today, we have 8 programs. So in less than 9 months, we've developed 5 new programs. This is for a team of less than 15 people. And the reason we're able to be so productive is because of the power of our platform. And our platform gathers data, and our platform gives us a lot of insight into where drugs will work, our drugs will work, and also oftentimes in cancers that are not fully understood. And so these signals allow us to go rapidly back into the lab and test these ideas. So what is the platform? Again, we get data from historical trials, proprietary internal studies, collaborations with partners, active clinical trials, trials that are in adjacent drug classes and tumors, sequencing campaigns, drug sensitivity studies, and then open source from tons of publications and research. In fact, we'll have a piece of research coming out tomorrow at the AACR, where we'll talk about one of our drugs, LP-184. So all this drives improved scientific value and, very importantly, improved patient value, because if we can bring these drugs to market faster for cancers that are underserved or not served, and we have examples of that, and also understand mechanisms better, that helps both the scientific community and ultimately also the patient community. So let's take a look at our platform today. If you look at our platform today, and I'll go into some examples on 184. Our platform today, it has 2 compounds that are in clinical stage, phase 2, prostate cancer drug that's being developed with our partner Alarity. That's for metastatic hormone refractory prostate cancer. This drug failed several trials 10 years ago, but the drug always worked in a subset of patients. So we used genomics and genomic signature creation to understand which cancers it works best in and which cancer is most likely to have a long-term durable effect. And so that's now in a phase 2 trial. So that drug wouldn't even be working today if it weren't for genomics. Our second drug is LP300 for non-small cell lung cancer. That drug also similarly failed 7 years ago, a trial in phase 3. It's been given to 1,000+ patients, and it didn't work in non-small cell lung cancer. But if you take a look at a subset of non-smokers, it worked very well. In fact, it improved their overall survival by 91%. But non-smoking, non-small cell lung cancer is very different than smoking-based non-small cell lung cancer. And so the genomics today are better understood. And so we relaunched that drug in a very particular class. Our third drug, LP184, is being worked on in solid tumors such as pancreatic that overexpress PTGR1. And it's also being worked on in glioblastoma and ATRT. Those are brain cancers. And those are both predictions that are radar engine made. We're loading data about the mechanism that we thought was driving LP184 activity in solid tumors. It gave us a signal that CNS cancers would work really well. Once we validated that, we loaded up another 200 million plus data points across a wide range of brain cancer. And we also found that it would work in an ultra rare brain cancer called atypical teratoid rhabdoid tumors, ATRT. And so now we're also progressing in that indication. And that indication 4 or 5 months ago didn't exist. And so that's how rapidly we're developing these new indications. And as probably Dr. Sri can tell you, typically in a big pharma, the time to develop a new indication is at least 1 year, oftentimes 2. We're doing that in a course of about 3 to 4 months. We also developed a new drug, LP284, guided by the machine. This is a stereoisomer of 184, very different properties, and it works in hematologic cancers. And we're developing a signature to correlate which leukemic and refractory cells it works best in. And our final drug, the newest one that I'm very excited about, is LP-A18. It's an antibody drug conjugate program. Again, we developed that program in 4 months, what normally would have taken a biotech historically about 2 years. So we have patents across all of these cancers and all of the drugs. We have about 70 patents issued and pending across 14 families. So patents are very important to us long-term. So these are our different small molecules, with the exception of the ADC that we're developing that you see up on the screen. And with that, I'm going to switch over to talking about one very specific case study, and that's with LP184 and how we're using machine learning in LP184. So if you can bear with me, I'm going to switch PowerPoints. LP184 is one of our drugs, as I mentioned, that has been guided by, really from start to finish, by machine learning. So I thought that would be a good case study. Great, here we go. So let's talk about LP184. We developed the signature using an AI approach. Please make sure you can see my screen. Can you guys see my screen or?
Not yet.
Let's see what I can do here. Share screen. Here we go.
Yeah.
How's that?
Yes.
Okay. So this is a very interesting case study. So the way our machine learning approach works, and this is why this world today is very interdisciplinary, is we have a lot of data sets that need to be normalized, curated, tagged, and then they develop into certain training sets. That's a data science activity. Biologists typically don't understand that, although they can help guide it. But there's a new generation of computational biologists that better understand data. So, things are beginning to change. we'll train, we'll use various algorithms. We have about over half a dozen, probably 8 or 9 now, different algorithms. These are all machine learning methods that we train on these data sets to ask different problems. These data sets compete with one another to perform certain signatures, to provide answers. These answers are checked for 2 fundamental things: statistical relevance or superiority and biological relevance. And so once we have those 2, we tune and optimize the various algorithms. We make them compete. We typically run the algorithms 20 to 50 times, sometimes 100 times, to see how the responses change. And that gives us a signature. And it helps us understand mechanisms, and it helps us understand which populations will work on a drug. So let's look at LP-184. We build models using multiple algorithms. We tested the models on a blind set of IC50 data to derive the best set of signatures. We then used multi-omic approach through our collaboration with the National Cancer Institute. And then we applied the updated signature to predict the drug sensitivity of LP-184 across over 1,000 different cell lines, covering 22 different cancer types. And once we had that, we could then decide what are the cancers most likely to take this drug forward in, and that's what we did. So we developed the signature, we streamlined our preclinical development so we knew where to spend the money. We predicted the results well ahead of the future studies, and we also continued to develop the architecture. So let's also talk a little bit about how we did this. So what we did for model and building and prediction testing, we initially built the model on all the NCI 60 cell lines. We derived a 38 gene signature that we thought was interesting, but biologically we had some concerns about the signature. We then used 2 different models focusing just on solid tumors. So this is where AI wouldn't have told you this, but this is what I call AI as augmented intelligence. We decided that solid tumors were more likely to be responsive, and one of the drivers we knew was prostaglandin reductase, which doesn't really exist in many of the hematologic malignancies. From this, we then created 2 different competing signatures, one using a lasso regression model, one using a random forest regressor model. And again, this was both using transcriptomic data as well as dose response data. And so now we have 2 competing signatures that had very, very high superiority. Let's take a look at what we did next. So we tested the model on new cell lines so that we were agnostic to. And we had various prediction accuracies, both for using 2-fold and 4-fold cutoff. As you can see in the 4-fold cutoff, we got nearly 80 plus, on average about 80% accuracy, ranging from 78 to 89.1%. We obviously used the higher model. But it's very interesting to note, as the number of genes decreased, the accuracy actually increased. So sometimes simpler is always better. So we used the 9-gene signature using the 4-fold cutoff value. And let's see what we did forward. So what we did then is ensure the biological relevance. So do these genes actually mean something? Are they involved in the actual mechanism? And so as we mentioned, this is a DNA damage agent. And so we knew that many of the genes that we found, bullet point 1, are related to DNA damage response. So that was a positive. We also knew that many of the genes were involved in chromatin modeling, which also overlaps with the proposed mechanism of action for this drug. So this gives us very strong belief that this was a biologically relevant signature that we were developing. We then, after we predicted it, we identified several cancers as the top cancers, including lung. We have a paper coming out on lung, kidney, thyroid, pancreas. We're launching in pancreas with Fox Chase, and ovarian as the top cancers that will be sensitive to this drug. And that helped save thousands and thousands of man hours in the lab and help direct our work. And so then we tested on those lines. And if you take a look at this, this is pretty remarkable. Our drug is in the green. Our drug was hundreds, if not thousands of times more potent than the standard of care drugs such as cisplatin and pemetrexed in these cancers. And so that gave us a really good feeling that we were going down the right path, that the signature was relevant, that the lab work was correlating. And again, we're looking at nanomolar potency. And so this gave us a very high level of confidence. And so then we decided there's some new methods that we're using, and I won't talk about those today in detail, but these are all now methods that we've all incorporated. We're using things such as elastic net, convolutional neural networks, XGBoost, which we use heavily now, and Baruda feature selection, which is an advanced form of random forest methods. So again, this is all, really machine learning that's being done today in lots of different industries, whether it be imaging or traffic or weather or crop analysis, but we're applying it specifically to drug development. And so a lot of this wasn't even available 3 or 4 years ago, and you didn't have the machines to run these kind of capabilities. So we did use XGBoost in combination with Baruda feature selection. And as you can see, some of the cancers that we picked, we improved the sensitivity to 86%. And more importantly, in one of the cancers that we thought made a lot of sense was pancreatic, and we actually increased the predictive sensitivity using XGBoost and Baruda to 100%. Now, I never believe anything that's 100%. That's never true in biology. Nothing is always 100%, but it's at least gives us a good sense that the model is very confident in its ability to achieve a high predictive power. So let's look at what Baruda feature selection is. I'll talk a little bit about it, but it creates randomly shuffled data. And then it does this over and over and over again, and takes attributes that have very high predictive power and rejects other ones. And so the whole process, it can do, literally thousands of these processes in microseconds. And this is really, really complicated to do with high dimensional omic data. So if you're looking at data sets of 100 million or 250 million, or in our case, over 1 billion, or even if you just take pancreatic cancer and say it's 50 million, and you have drug sensitivity data, this is nearly impossible to do in any kind of method that's not machine learning enabled. And so this is why we're at the forefront of using these types of methods like XGBoost and Baruda to measure and train our models. And this is an important part of how we grow as a company. We're expanding it also now to the predictive power in other areas. Like I said, we're looking at blood-brain barrier and being able to predict that for drugs. Again, an area that so far models are being trained very well. We predicted the blood-brain barrier for LP-184 and it was a very, very good result. So the way that, and we tested it, it's not just modeling it, so now we tested it. If you look at the 184 as it crossed the blood-brain barrier, it had much superior results versus the standard of care, temozolomide. And like we said, even though it's a developmental stage drug, it has blood-brain barrier permeability that's pretty much in par with other approved drugs. And so we're seeing that the power of this platform to make predictions about sensitivity and other factors is very high. Typically, we put everything in the cloud and we use Amazon. We have our tech stack is Nextflow, GitHub, Docker, et cetera, for all our version controlling, job line, submission management, containerization. And then we have various report analyses that we share with the scientists, all in HTML. And then we have an architecture for data storage as well. And so as the data becomes larger and bigger, it'll increase the power of our platform. And as I mentioned, we are looking to develop more and more of our data team potentially in India in the coming year or two. This is a big area. It's going to transform medicine. This data-driven, we believe that over $4 billion will be spent on an annualized basis by pharma and drug discovery companies on building new AI-driven infrastructure to guide drug discovery and drug development. So that's a lot. If you think about drug discovery and drug development, it is not 40% of the, healthcare dollar spend. That's actually a very small percentage. But the fact that 40% of the healthcare dollar spend will be on drug discovery in AI shows you that this industry will be transformed. Just like every other industry has been totally eaten by AI, it'll do the same thing in drug discovery. So with that, I'll take a pause here and ask if people have any questions.
Thanks a lot, Panna. I think this is very refreshing and very insightful to see how Lantern is using AI to guide its drug development. And so, looking back at my work at Princeton when you were there, essentially, there's when you develop these drugs, especially in early phase clinical trials, and you have these patients coming in which are hard to treat kind of categories, and then you test these newer drugs, so the bar is fairly high. So how is your experience in terms of hypothesis generation, in terms of mechanistic understanding of what's working and what's not working, and especially when you talk about responders versus non-responders. So in our case, we were working on PD-1 drug. So then the FDA told us, how do we want to stratify the patients with PD-L1 receptors, or the biomarker around that, and we were really not sure into how it was, and so it's just that shows the mechanistic complications. So how is, what I'm trying to ask is, how is AI helping us to generate these hypotheses on mechanistic understanding of disease, which is fairly critical, especially to select patient population, and who's responder, who's not responders. Any thoughts on that?
Sure, there are a lot of different ways to attack that problem. I don't know the specific problem you're looking at, but you could do it by structural-based drug design. You could take a look at it by looking at response data, both pre and post dosing, by taking whole transcriptome or proteomic data. Again, AI is not a solution; it's just a tool.
Right.
So it depends on, you have to gather the data that's going to give you insight. If you're not able to gather the data, that still is a human process. Now, once you have gathered the data, you can train the machine to gather the data for you in the future. But in the case of your problem with PD-1 prediction or mechanism, if you didn't reach a solution, then I would argue that you probably didn't have the right data. And PD-1 is, obviously a protein, so maybe you need to gather more protein data. Maybe you need to look at structural data, because different PD-1 binds with different properties, different strengths. The binding could be affected by chemistry, could be affected by another drug. So I don't know. I don't have an answer. I'm just, we're using a tool.
Yeah,
so
I understand. It is complicated.
Yeah. The tool is open to being used, by anyone, whoever has imagination.
Okay.
I think the more people you can bring together in a room that are interdisciplinary, that have complete knowledge of their domains and are open to using new tools, I think the faster you'll have progress. Again, your question is mechanism, and I would say, well, there's no one button you push to understand mechanism. It depends on the drug class. It depends on, does it work outside the cell, inside the cell, on the surface of the cell? Is it in combination with another drug? Is it not in combination with a drug? So I would say we'd have to sit down and map out what is it that we're trying to understand. And then we can create an AI that will help us do that, because the limits of the human brain are that we go to sleep. We have biases, we eat, we can't consume data without all kinds of issues. But if we can train machines to do that, then it improves our chances to ask and answer questions faster.
Right. So as someone who's been working at the very edge of these technologies, so where do you see this making a big impact, essentially, in the drug development? The next 5 years, 10 years? Where are we?
I think the next 5 to 10 years, I think the biggest issue is going to be cost. It's going to really bring costs down. So AI has transformed the costs of transportation, aviation, retail, fashion, finance, and it's going to smash the cost in drug development. Drugs shouldn't cost so much to develop.
Yeah.
And the problem with drug development historically is that we've left it in a handful of minds, medicinal chemists and cancer biologists and highly paid PhDs and PhD MDs, and they don't share data, they don't share insights. And so it's a clumsy, awkward field that needs to be transformed, that has been, and I think COVID-19 has helped accelerate that. We can generate a vaccine in a year. It's no mistake. But both companies that did the vaccine initially, BioNTech, which was through Pfizer, and Moderna, were both messenger RNA companies.
Yeah, right. And both of them have
so these are
new technologies.
Totally new platforms.
Totally in
And so I
platforms.
think, and they were genomically driven from day one,
Right.
data driven, a lot of computational virology modeling. And I think that shows, if you look at Eli Lilly, they failed.
Right.
Merck, they failed.
Yeah.
So a lot of the big historical pharma companies, they failed at creating the vaccine.
Yeah.
With the exception of AstraZeneca, which is a mediocre vaccine, and J&J, which is an interesting one.
Yeah.
So it's, innovation has to come from the outside.
Right.
It forces collaboration, opens up data sources. And I always like to ask the question of what can we do
Right.
better or different, as opposed to what can we not do?
Right.
And I think that is one of the biggest issues in drug discovery, is that moving the question to what can we do?
Right.
And it's okay if the AI doesn't do it well, at least you've tried it. And the second time you try it, it'll do it better. And the third time you try it, it'll do it better. It's much better having different AIs compete than having, one team in Pune and one team in Connecticut and a small team in Oxford working on medicinal chemistry, burning through millions of dollars, going home and sleeping 8 hours a night and having biases. It's just, that's not a sustainable model.
It's not a sustainable model. Absolutely, I agree with you. Yeah, and so this whole, we've been talking for the entire week around that, and there's one common theme that is coming in essentially is over and over again is about quality of data and collaboration. And do you think, especially in pharma, where we have this whole mentality of siloism, so do you think that has to change essentially going forward if we really were to leverage the AI?
Absolutely. Yeah, people need to continue being really expert in certain areas, but I think the silos will change. That's one of the reasons I think the farmers will have to buy companies like ours or others, is that they can't change their silos fast enough.
Right.
So if you go to big pharma and you ask them, are they doing AI? Sure, they're doing AI. They have bigger budgets, bigger data sets, lots more people, but they're not really making it core to their, if we don't do drug development with AI, we don't exist as a company.
Exactly. That's what your core DNA is.
Yeah. So if they don't do it, no one cares, because they're still making, they're making millions of dollars off of existing branded products.
Yes. That's
so
like
the CEO, the CEO is not, his job is to protect the revenue streams that exist and innovate at the edges. And someone will say, well, you don't need to spend $25 million in AI this year. Why don't you find one of these new companies in 3 or 4 years, you just buy it. That's how they think.
Right. And so, Panna, essentially, coming back to the whole and the COVID situation that we are into now, especially, and when you look at some of these neuro-oncology drugs that have been approved, most of them are biologics. So, a country like India, where most of the cost is out of pocket, they become extremely expensive. Very restrictive.
Well, that's why I think. That's why I think countries like India need to jump on this trend faster.
Right.
The only way to bring down the cost is innovate locally. You shouldn't be relying on outside countries to drive your medicines. I mean, I think that's just foolish. The amount of talent countries like India and China have, they should be driving the boat in the future. So I expect a lot more innovation from countries like India and China. And you're beginning to see that in China.
Yeah, exactly. China's taking the lead in that, but we're still a little slower in India. Essentially, I think that'll need a lot of cultural mindset change. It'll need a lot of cross-disciplinary collaborations, and that has to happen. I mean, dependency on the best countries.
The biggest mindset change is local investment and what is the role of pharma in India. The role of pharma in India, unfortunately, has been set up so that you have the vaccine vala is making tons of money doing contracts. So when India's they're thought of as a manufacturer. There's no innovation.
Exactly.
It's a different kind of innovation there.
Yeah.
And so I think the new generation needs to think about how do we innovate and develop new medicines or rescue medicines. There's thousands and thousands of compounds sitting on the shelves that could be repurposed for indications. And I think from a regulatory perspective, the India government also and other governments should think about how do we fast track rescuing compounds that have a history of safety or usage for new indication development.
Yeah, so repurposing has to come in the forefront as such, essentially. I think that'll drive.
Yeah, repurposing to me is essentially really a data issue.
Right. I mean, I think with COVID, we saw that essentially, this whole remdesivir and all sorts of stuff that we've used essentially. That has really brought to front essentially the power of, and rethinking on that, I guess. Yeah. Amit has a question here.
Sorry, what are the
Yeah.
questions?
Yeah, well, Amit has a question here. Amit is also into AI. He's working there. He says, Dr. Sharma, thank you for insight. Can you please elaborate on role of AI in indication selection? He talks about indication selection as such.
Sure, just to create, I'm not a doctor, so on indication selection. Okay, so when we talk about indication, we're looking at what subtype of cancer, just so we're clear on that. So indication selection would be, we know this compound has powerful cytotoxic properties and has high cell kill rate, but which areas do we focus in on? And so that is partly a question about mechanism, and then partly a question about what are the most likely biomarker signatures in different cancers. And so if we find that there's a biomarker signature that correlates with response, but that signature is in 20% of pancreatic cancer, but it's only in 4 or 5% of prostate, well, we'll probably pick pancreatic cancer.
Yeah.
Right. So indication selection is something that is really essential, because if you only have $100,000 to do preclinical cell line development and cell line work, or say 200,000, you can go through that money really fast in the lab, at least in the US. And so the AI will allow you to test dozens and dozens of different ideas. And so that when you do go to the lab or you go to small animals, you do have the right indications that have the most likelihood of succeeding.
Right. So, Panna, with your experience with FDA, how are you seeing them, look at that kind of approach as such, in terms of, is there still some kind of a skepticism out there, or they're buying in compared to EMEA? How do you see the pattern out there essentially? Is EMEA more open to kind of innovative approaches compared to FDA?
I don't know. I don't know enough about comparing the two.
Okay.
To comment. That's mostly handled by a different group. But in terms of my interactions, I think the FDA seems very open to innovation. They're open to ideas. They may or may not act on them, but they're definitely open to learning about ideas and testing new ideas, especially in diseases where there is no standard of care. So I talked about ATRT, atypical teratoid rhabdoid tumors. There's no standard of care. It's a dealer's choice. Very high death rate. 80% of that cancer occurs in children. And so they're very open. They want to fast track that drug.
Right.
So I think I think in general regulatory bodies are there to protect. They can get in the way, but I haven't seen it. I've seen them mostly be very open to learning.
That. Right. Great. Faculty, if you have any questions, you can post it in chat box, or if you want to unmute and ask it yourself, you can do that at this point of time.
Dr. Sharik, I think there is one participant, Dr. Vivek Patil. He has raised the hand, I think.
Okay. Yeah. Vivek, go ahead, unmute yourself if you have any questions.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yes.
Yes. Okay. Thanks, Mr. Sharma, for sharing very interesting knowledge. It was really insightful. Maybe I missed something, but I want to know or ask to you that, as you said, you have prepared gene signature based on a cell line data. So as cell lines are already a representative of the disease, and if we are predicting or preparing a model based on the cell line data, how likely it is to predict accurate for the actual human disease? And that's
it's 0% likely.
Okay. So how about considering the actual patient data? Is it easy to get it from the hospitals?
It's challenging. So the cell line data helps guide and inform ideas. We then take the cell line data and go to spheroids. And then from spheroids, we go to animal models. Then from animal models, we go to fresh biopsy material. And hopefully the signature holds up. So for one of our signatures for 184, there's been refinements to the signature, but largely it's held up. Some signatures break down, but for our 184, for that drug, the cell line data all the way now going into fresh biopsy material that we've gotten, the signature continues to be largely similar. There have been some refinements, but largely similar. So yeah, but I would never assume that a signature that works in cell lines is going to work in humans. It just gives you a good idea, an approximation. And if you look at our work, I always talk about the most relevant physiological model. And it's definitely not cell line. But it's a good starting point because you can do it anywhere. And we try to get quickly to 3D models and PDX models, and those are much more predictive. And then we work with top institutions like Georgetown, Johns Hopkins, Sloan Kettering, Fox Chase. These are all cancer centers. And we try to work there to develop 3D organoid type models for the systems that we're looking at. And all of these then help refine the signature even further.
Thanks for sharing. And are you also considering the links data which is available? And I guess links data is also prepared based on thousands of compounds against cancer and non-cancer cell lines?
Yeah, we do look at that data. It's not part of our core system, but we do look at that, yes.
Okay.
It's some interesting, we get a lot of interesting ideas about combination protocols. How can we use our drug in combination with other drugs? So yeah, that's useful there.
Yes,
So-
and suppose if you have a case where you are repurposing something based on the gene signature, and if there is a possibility of combination, how do you prefer to use the combinational drug into the same pathway, or you will prefer to have this covering multiple pathways to have more disease coverage? What will be the choice?
It depends on the disease. There's no one common answer, but typically the answer is you want multiple pathways. So in cancer, typically the cancer cells will find clever ways to combat your approach. And so if you cut off 2 pathways or 3 pathways at the same time, then there's a higher chance that you'll kill off the cells. And so
Right.
that's why our approach is to use synergistic, but usually adjacent pathways.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So, but in your experience, the multi-hit approach, sometimes, I mean, you end up into some kind of, adverse reactions and stuff like that. So I think there's a
Oh yeah,
act.
absolutely. Yeah.
Right. So Panna, there's this young faculty, group that is coming here. What is your advice into collaborative research? And primarily, we have 70% of them from life sciences, 30% of them are from core engineering domain. What's your advice to them in terms of research into health sciences and AI? What piece of advice would you give to them?
My biggest advice is to try to stay at the forefront of what's going on in your industry. Collaborate globally. Don't think locally. Collaborate globally, and try to reach out and work with leading companies. I think companies are more open than ever to sharing knowledge, doing projects, thinking about opportunities. I think, health sciences today is really a global issue, and people should think globally, work the best they possibly can, and
Yes.
Collaboration should take up 50 to 70% of your time, because that's where you're going to learn.
Absolutely, and that is a wonderful piece of advice, I think. If there are no further questions, essentially, any further questions before we, thank Panna for his time, essentially. Anyone?
Okay, well, Dr. Schmidt, thank you. I want to thank you.
Thank you so much. So, and setting up. Thank you so much, Panna, for spending your really valuable time, and which is an honor for us to be listening from someone who's fairly busy and who's really overseeing his whole enterprise, from a top approach. So it was really beneficial. It was really insightful. I'm getting messages here from my students also that it was very insightful. Maybe future we'll definitely try to bring you back here. To learn more about how Lantern is doing and what are the next steps that are going on. So wish you a safe time, essentially. And thank you so much once again on behalf of all of us here at Kalsigar Technical Campus and all our faculties in India. We thank you for your time. Definitely like to see you back here once again.
Thank you. It's been an honor to present to you.
It's been an honor here as well. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Have a good rest of the evening. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. We'll continue with the meeting, Panna. And okay, great. Take care. Our next speaker, Mr. Anand Mahokar, should be able to join in a couple of minutes or so. We'll we will stay in here and take a 5 minutes break or so, and then we'll get started hopefully by 8 o'clock or so. We should be here another couple of minutes or so. So for those of you who just joined, we just finished our first session by Panna Sharma. We'll wait for another 5 minutes or so. And hopefully the next speaker, Mr. Anand Mavkar, will be joining in a minute or so. And then we'll get started by 8 or 8:02. think Anand has just joined in.
Hi, Doctor.
Good morning, Anand. How are you?
Very good. Good evening to you.
Good evening. Good evening. A very warm good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining. Um, we were just waiting for you. We just finished Panna's talk a couple of years back, so we're all set for your talk here. So without further wasting the time, give me 1 second. I'll just pull up my slides. Okay, I think we'll get started here. So it's my honor and pleasure to welcome Anand Maharkar. He's a founder and CEO of Findability Sciences, coming all the way from Boston, USA. Anand has a very interesting journey and story that he hopefully will share here. And born in a middle-class family from Maharashtrian family, he was raised by parents Prabhakar and Tara Maharkar. And Anand completed his 12 years of education in a place called Ambijugai in Marathwada region in Marathi, and demonstrated great aptitude in maths and sciences. Moving from a small town in Ambijugai to a considerably larger place in Aurangabad, he's moved to US essentially, and he's built his career in Bharat Forge, and then ultimately being the founder CEO of Findability Sciences essentially, right? So driven by his philosophy of always aiming one step ahead, Anand started with the data analytics technologies in Mumbai as vice president, ultimately coming up and building his own company of Findability Sciences. Findability Sciences was recently had in a good, strong investment by SoftBank from Japan, and that speaks of volumes about the core strength of the company as such. So, on behalf of Anjuman Islam Scholarship Technical Campus, and behalf of AICT and IST, and all my faculty colleagues who have coming all over from India, right from Kashmir all the way down to Kerala, we are very excited and honored to welcome Anand Maharkar here for this 1-week faculty development program. So welcome, Anand, to this platform. It's an honor and privilege to have you here, essentially, and we're excited to hear from you, essentially.
Thank you, Dr. Said. It's really my honor to talk to you all, and you have given me a difficult task that it's 8 p.m. in India, and you guys have gone through 1 week of program, and you have heard a lot about AI and its applications. And so I've been working all night to make this more interesting and plus educative.
Thank you.
So I may take a little different route than other presenters have taken. So I'm going to go into a little bit of technology, not just on the healthcare.
Okay.
And then I'm taking, as I mentioned to you in the past, I'm going to walk you guys through a real applications into a non-clinical area, because you heard a lot during the week on how AI is used in diagnostics or drug development and etc. But there's a wider applications for healthcare, and personally, I'm doing this for more than 10 years. And Dr. Said, as you rightly said, that Findability Sciences is now a global company. I started alone about 10 years ago, and now we are in India, Japan, US, and Canada. So I'm going to share my uh, deck. I hope I'm audible to everybody.
Yes,
I would like to have questions. If anybody has any questions, please don't worry about interrupting me in between. I do this for living. I do presentations worldwide. I travel across the globe and being a keynote speaker into large conferences. So please feel free to send questions. I would like to have it interactive.
Sure.
And since I heard that there are some students also on this call, as I said, I want to go into some basics and then build a story from there. I will be, as I said, I don't want this to be monologue, but again, it's your choice. If there is no question, that's fine, but you can interrupt me the flow.
Sure.
And at the end also, I will open up for any questions.
Fantastic. Yes.
Okay, then I can start. Dr. Said.
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to have lots of visuals for you guys so that we make this interesting.
Great.
So You can see my screen, right?
Yes, we can see your screen, Anand.
Okay. Our the area, but before we go there, let's first recap you heard during the week, and I know that I'm talking to lots of educators, professor, PhDs on this call, but I prefer to go into the basics that what is really AI, because everybody I have seen in 10 years, even experts have their own definitions, and it's a very wide field and area of work. So I like to first define and set the tone that AI is basically a machine which learns, perceives, reasons, and solves the problem. So these four words are most important. And by the way, as you heard my background, I'm an engineer. I groomed myself into computer engineering and programming, and I deal more into data and software than healthcare. Therefore, I would like to go because you heard a lot of on healthcare and you all are experts in that area. But how do a technology is built in form of AI to solve critical challenges in human lives is basically because of these four main areas, that any machine which learns, perceives, reasons, and solves the problem is basically an AI. So, four important words to continue following through this presentation. And basically, there are five different divisions of AI. And these different divisions are most important to know because how do the technology world divides AI into five different groups. The first and foremost is the robotics, which again, we know it, we'll go through some couple of examples, and we have seen this robotics in the market for last 30-40 years. The second most popular and most important area is the autonomous vehicles. The third is computer vision. Again, you must have gone through lots of presentations and you all know that how X-ray can be read or how now AI can find out from the images, does diagnostics, etc. But that area of technology is called computer vision. The fourth is the natural language processing. This is a very important area, and again, a little bit of non-clinical applications, and I'll be covering those. And the last but not the least is machine learning, which again, Mr. Sharma, just previous presenter, must have talked about how machine learning is used in drugs development and etc. But I want to make sure that all of us are on the same page in terms of these are the broad classifications of AI. And when someone is really talking about AI, I always prefer them to dive into one of these classifications so that it removes the clutter in the mind is really what is AI and what it does. So any machine which learns, perceives, reasons, and solves the problem in the area of robotics, autonomous vehicle, computer vision, natural language programming, and machine learning is really AI. Now let's go into each one of these details. And I'm taking some examples for clinical, non-clinical applications, but I'm sure you must be knowing, and I personally work, as Dr. Said said, with a company named SoftBank. And what you are seeing in this picture is a robot which is developed by SoftBank. And what is robotics is really design, construction, and use of machines to perform the tasks done traditionally by human beings. Now, very interestingly, as some of you may be aware or all of you may be aware that robots are now used into healthcare. And this is a real example and real image from a healthcare facility in UK, where now the robots are deployed to talk to patients. Patients with typically with memory lack or issues with their neural systems, they keep asking probably the same questions, and humans finally may lose patience in answering those questions or interacting all day with those people. Now robots or robotics has come to a level where it can replace some of the human tasks being done in healthcare. Taking this example, which is a real example, and this robot, if you all can search on Google, it's called Pepper, Pepper, and you can see different applications of Pepper, not only into the day-to-day lives of humans, but particularly very interesting applications in healthcare. The next is this image you can see is the autonomous vehicle. Now, what are the autonomous vehicles? Are the vehicle which can sense the environment and move safely. But as you may see in the picture, and CVS Pharmaceutical is now testing how these autonomous vehicles can be used in drug delivery. If someone just uploads a prescription, this vehicle can come to your home and deliver the prescription at your home very securely and very easily without any efforts. So autonomous vehicles, again, we know the applications in terms of Tesla and Google trying their cars, but there are very interesting applications coming in autonomous vehicle, which is the second section or segment of AI, is really the drug delivery or use of these autonomous vehicle into some of the healthcare applications. The third is the computer vision. Again, some of the areas I'm going to skip because you guys have gone through the details over last week program, and some of you must be experts in these areas. Uh, but we as computer engineers use computer vision into multiple areas of technology, not just in healthcare, but basically how do you automatically extract or infer an image or 3D models for object detection, recognition, grouping, searching image and content. So there are lots of applications again coming on computer vision for healthcare, and those are also very interesting in the areas of non-clinical, which I will cover it in a minute. Moving to the fourth section, and this is where I'm going to spend a little more time because the first three, the robotics, autonomous vehicle, and computer vision, again, you may have gone through these examples and you may be aware, but natural language processing or programming is coming out to be a very interesting area of AI for non-clinical applications, where basically it is an interaction between humans and computers in a human language. Again, in a real life, when you call an airline or a hotel booking, you must have interacted with chat bots or voice bots. But there are very interesting applications where now you can interact with patients or patients can interact with machines. But before we go there, I would like to again, for those who may not be familiar with, that there are four different types of natural language programming or processing. The first and foremost is text analytics. You can now take the text and process through machine to understand sentiment, tone, understand the entities, keywords. You can summarize the content. You can provide personality insight. So I can actually take the text from a patient or a doctor or a pharmacist and run through the natural language programming and can understand the sentiment of that person or can understand the tone or can actually understand the personality insights, where we can go up to a level where we can understand the need, values, and what are the personalities of that particular human. The second branch of the natural language processing, which I was just mentioning, is the chatbot, which is where typically the patient services or information services. As we work with number of hospitals here, and as you know that in United States and so far now coming up in even in India, the medical facilities are very large and very big. So when a patient walks in into the facility, if just the information services can be now used by a non-human technologies like natural language processing, we are seeing a lot of applications in mental care where again humans who are listening to the mental care issues also can get into depressions and mental issues. So instead of that, can machine answer the question or can machine understand the issues related to mental care, and very significant applications coming in that area. The next is voice bot, that not only I'm texting, but I can actually do the voice conversation, and those are again human-like conversations. And the last but not the least is emails, where now most of the emails can be automated using the natural language processing, where we can understand the intent and the entities of each communication and then send an email without really any human interferences. So the natural language processing is emerging as a very interesting and influential branch in healthcare, where not necessarily the clinical areas but not non-clinical areas can be automated to enhance the customer service or patient service or the relative services, because not only the patients but their relatives also have lots of issues in terms of getting information or knowledge, and most of those processes are now automated through natural language processing. The next area, and I'm going to go into little more detail because I personally believe that all the professors on this call and the students need to know little more in this area from the technology side, not just on the application side, is that how machine learning algorithms works and what are the typical types of machine algorithms, and there are some examples in the applications. So before we go there, again, you must have gone through this during the week, but I would like to repeat just for the case of refresher, is that what is really machine learning? So machine learning has few steps, which again I'm simplifying and breaking it down to a bite-sized consumption. Is first is it detects the patterns. So it detects patterns from your data, then it does prediction. So it understands from your historic data, understand the patterns, makes the predictions. Then once the predictions are made, it makes recommendations. And once the recommendations are done, it can respond to new data to improve efficacy. Again, I'm just breaking it into words so that we all can remember simplistically that what is machine learning, if someone understands, is basically detecting the patterns, making predictions, making recommendation. If there is any new data change, then respond to that and basically improve the efficacy on recommendations and predictions. I further go down and divide this, and particularly for all the students on the call, is what are the common machine learning applications? And I want to divide this into three simple English statements. The first common machine learning applications is basically telling you what happened. Now, when I'm saying what happened, it can be wide area of business applications, not just in healthcare or even including healthcare or pharmaceutical. Everybody wants to know what happened. And you would be surprised to know that the 80% of the current businesses uses Microsoft Excel as a technology to tell you what happened. And this is basically giving reports or giving analysis or understanding the diagnostics and telling that what happened. But where is the machine learning coming in is to tell you what will happen. This is where the data consumption by large algorithms and then predicting what will happen is the most important branch of AI or machine learning, where you can learn what will happen. And we typically call this as a predictive analytics or predictive uh, technology. And the last but not the least is what to do. So I want these three questions to be remembered by everybody, is that machine learning applications are in three areas: what happened, what will happen, and what to do, which is called prescriptive. And the most common and interesting areas of AI for developing applications, again in healthcare as well as pharmaceutical or drug development, is really what will happen and what to do. This is where human brain capacity lacks, because we cannot process millions of data items in one go and then can imagine what will happen in future. So where the computer scientists have really succeeded is consuming those historic data or historic data patterns, predict what will happen and what to do. So I can guarantee you that what you learned over last 1 week or what you know as AI, if you really try to silo this into three areas of what happened, what will happen, and what to do, the subject becomes very simple. And then we can create a lot of imaginary applications and actually develop those practical applications for healthcare and non-healthcare areas. So before we go into the applications of machine learning, I also thought that some of you, those who may not be familiar, I want to educate a little bit on the technology, that there are three common types of machine learning. The very first and very common, which again most of the healthcare applications are built on, the branch of machine learning which is called supervised machine learning. Now again, I feel that since this is a group of academicians, we all should know what is really a supervised machine learning. And those who may not be aware, I want to again make it very simple, that supervised machine learning is an algorithm which basically knows both input and output. Now, what I mean by input and output is really you have your historic data, and what you are doing really is you are taking that historic data and feeding it to the application, and you know what target you are looking for. So what I'm meaning by target is, for example, I'm trying to predict whether some patient has some particular disease or not. So I know the target because I'm looking at diagnostics, and I have the historic data and I'm putting that into algorithm, and then it is telling me the output whether that patient has that disease or not. So that is a typical application of supervised machine learning. And now, since we have supervised, naturally there is another branch of machine learning, which is unsupervised machine learning. And the difference between the supervised and unsupervised machine learning is unsupervised machine learning has lots of input, but doesn't know what you are looking for. So for example, if you have lots of drug data or patient data, and you tell it to the machine algorithm saying, you take this data and tell me, I don't know what I'm looking for in this data, but can a machine read that data, understand, and again, going back to the AI definition, can it learn, can it perceive, can it reason, and can it solve my problem in telling that I have a million patient data or a million drug data? Can I output of that done by supervised machine learning? And it's mostly used for research data or where you have large data and you want to make some inference out of it. So I repeat that most of the applications which you may know or you have studied during the 1 week are really the area where uh, so I'm getting question and I really like it. Please keep sending question in the chat bot and I'll answer those question as it comes in. But just to finish on this unsupervised machine learning and supervised machine learning is the most common applications are supervised machine learning. Now I'm getting question from Vicky Patil, which is asking me that is supervised means classified. Yes, I will go into little more detail. Classification is a branch of supervised learning, but not only the classification. So you're right. It is a classification technology, but there are two types of supervised machine learning. One, typically I call it as predictions, where you are doing classification, something will happen or not, whether this person has a disease or not, or whether this drug will work or not. So those are classifications, but there are multiple classifications also. So typically the way I explain it's a black and white, but the shades of gray also in between. So you may have multi-class and you can use supervised machine learning for multi-class. And then the third is that when you take this data and put it on a scale of time, it becomes time series predictions, which is typically called as a forecasting. So the next question is basically unsupervised algorithms is exploring associations then. Yes, not really. When you are talking about association, it is you are calling it as a correlation between the data. And yes, one of the application of unsupervised learning is correlation, but correlation can be done even in supervised learning. The unsupervised learning, in addition to correlation, is, I would like, again, I'm keeping it at a very high level and not getting into technology, but clustering. So for example, if I take in Mumbai city all the traffic, I put sensors on the road, check the traffic, and put that data into the unsupervised algorithm and say, hey, find out what I'm learning from these traffic patterns. And then it may cluster saying that between 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. is a maximum traffic on this junction and etc. So yes, it correlation is one of the application. I'm not saying that, but that's not the only one. There can be many other. The clustering is the most common application for unsupervised, that cluster this data into different patterns or different groups. Yes, so generating hypothesis is also an application, Dr. Said. So you are right, and that's a very common unsupervised machine learning application to get through the data and understanding first, build a hypothesis, and then build further analysis or further algorithms. And that leads to, these questions are really interesting. And again, I want this to be at 8 p.m. India time. I want you all to be interestingly focusing on this, and I hope you are finding this useful, and I'm not going into too much of technicalities, but I thought that this information is very important to all the professors and students. If you know already that, you can always, please feel free to even add into my knowledge. But if you have any questions, please keep sending it to it. So the third branch of machine learning is a reinforcement learning. And in the reinforcement learning is a very interesting, because again, just to recap, supervised learning is where we have input and we know the output, or we know the target what we are looking for. Unsupervised machine learning is I have input, but I don't know what I'm looking for. Now in reinforcement learning, I have lots of data, but I don't know what that data is. And I don't know even the output. What I'm going to do is that I'm going to have machine tell me the answer, and the human brain will reinforce the learning of the machine. So let me take you a generic example. And this is actually used a lot in the image processing in the healthcare area. So reading x-rays or reading imageries. But take an example in a common life, that if you upload in Google a dog image or a cat image, then the algorithm will tell you that I see a cat here. But then you as a human say, oh, this is not cat, this is dog. So you teach the algorithm saying that this is dog. So that is the reinforcement learning coming to the algorithm, and humans keep giving it's called in the software programming, it's called rewards. So you interact with the algorithm and keep giving the reward saying, yes, this is correct, this is wrong, this is correct, this is wrong. And the algorithm learns, and that is a reinforcement algorithm. So really what I want you all as a healthcare experts is to get a little bit step outside and think from the technology angle, that how these technologies work, so that for you guys it will become so easy to understand all the applications in healthcare on AI. So machine learning is where most of the healthcare applications, and I skipped a little bit of earlier part because again it's very interesting that these machine learnings are used in robotics, it's used in computer vision, it is used in natural language programming, but machine learning stands alone as a big branch of AI, and it's very important to understand those. I'm going to go again a little bit further detail, but beyond this, I'm not going to drill down. I'm going to share my contact details. If anyone has any questions down the line or would like to understand more, I'll be more than happy. I'm very passionate about these topics, so would love to share any more details. And I'm going to skip these into details. But the supervised machine learning again is not new to the human beings. Lots of statisticians and mathematicians have developed different theories, and what we computer programmers have done is taken those theories and converted into software programs. So what I'm showing here on this image is the different branches of supervised machine learning. And you being the healthcare experts and the pharmaceutical experts, you don't need to really know about this. But again, those who are doing specific research using AI, I encourage you guys to learn about these different algorithms or these different methodologies of supervised learning. And you may hear people talking about that we use gradient boosting trees, or we use random forest technology, or we use linear quadrant, etc. So those are nothing but the statistical methodologies which theoretically were developed, or basically I always say that these are all available in the nature. The whole universe works based on that. But our statisticians have defined and in simple English or different languages, and the software programmers have coded into it. But there are different levels of supervised machine learning algorithms. And what I would like to do is take an example and make this subject further simpler, because there were questions on the classification and whether it is built for hypothesis and etc. So let me take a very simple generic application. And again, I'm particularly taking you beyond healthcare, because again, you guys are experts in healthcare and you have learned a lot about AI and healthcare. But let's take an example that I have a use case where I would like to, there is a hotel nearby, and we would like to predict that how many rooms in that hotel will get sold. Now, if that is an application, and again, you guys can now think about any ideas you have in your business or your subject matter expertise and you want to solve. So therefore, I'm taking very generic business application, and particularly students, I want them to get excited that they can try their hands tomorrow on supervised machine learning and how some problems can be solved very simplistically. So take a use case that where I have location of the hotel, I know who earlier stayed in that hotel, and etc. And I'm taking only two features. And in the software technology, we call this as features, or this can be columns in your data. Or some people call feature engineering, some call variables, some call columns in the data. But just to demystify and make it very simple, when I'm calling features or historic data, is really columns in your Excel sheet. So I'm taking a hotel and I'm putting what is the locations of the various hotels and who all earlier stayed there. And then once I know these features, I take the historical data for thousands of people or 5,000 people or last 1 year or last 2 years of data of those who stayed in that particular hotel. Then what I do is I take that historical data and build a just Excel sheet. And I'm just showing you here an example that I have hotel ID and I have whether this hotel was booked or not, and how many, is there any event around it, or how many visitors are there, what is the location. Now again, imagine healthcare applications or drug applications that you have so much of data in your industry where you take these columns and rows, and that is typically the historic data on what happened, and that in the supervised machine learning is called training data. So I take that training data and then I'm going to feed the new data into the system, take the prediction data. So I know who visited, and now I need to know how many people will visit this hotel or stay in that hotel. So I'm going to take my historic data and I'm going to take a little bit of futuric data and take the supervised learning algorithm. And I showed you a bunch of supervised learning algorithms. Most of those are now available in open source. So I encourage the professors and students that download an open source algorithm, take training data, take prediction data, dump into this algorithm, and this algorithm will tell you the prediction saying that how many hotels will be booked during this coming season. So you can say whether this hotel will be booked or not and which location and etc. So again, supervised machine learning is here. I know the training data. I know the output that I'm looking for, whether this hotel will be booked or not. And I'm taking the training data, training the algorithm, taking the prediction data and predicting. And yes, this is a typical classification case as Vicky Patil asked, that is, this is a classification. Now there can be many things, whether this hotel may be booked or not, or 0 or 1, or there may be in between, maybe as a in between classification. But I'm not going into the detail. Keep in mind that this is a very simple application one can develop in your industry. You can take your historic data, put the training data into the algorithm, put your future data, and the algorithm will tell you whether this something will happen or not. Now, as I mentioned earlier, now let's take an example, same example, but on a different scale. I want to now know that not only that whether somebody this hotel will be booked or not, because I explained to you as a classification use case. Now I want to put this on a scale of time. Now on a scale of time, when I put whether this hotel will be booked or not, then it doesn't become merely prediction, it becomes forecasting. So for example, in our general life, we use on our phone the weather app in terms of seeing whether this is going to happen or not, whether it's going to be a sunny day or a rainy day, or it's going to be snow or not. But it is on a scale of time, because I'm not only telling today, but I'm telling you tomorrow, day after tomorrow, next week, 10 days down the line. So when you put predictions on a scale of time, then it becomes forecasting. So my use case now is the same hotel use case, but I want to now predict on a scale of time that whether this hotel will be booked over next 1 week or 1 month or not. So what I'm doing is now I'm taking other features, and again reminding you that feature means the columns in your data in a very simplistic data science definition. These are the variables or these are the columns. So I'm going to take now historic weather, what happened, and for example, I'm just imagining that there is a McDonald's near that hotel. So I'm going to take the McDonald's data, I'm going to take day and month, because there may be a correlation between on which day the hotel is booked or not. So I take all these features, I build my historic data of weather, McDonald's sales, and etc., and then take that into my algorithm, where once I build this, create training data, I'm now taking the future calendar, put that forecast data into the supervised learning algorithm. But again, the use case is different, and Vicky, thanks for confirming that it was crystal clear for you that it is not necessarily only classification, because using supervised machine learning, now I'm doing forecasting. And again, guys, in your drug, pharmaceutical, and healthcare areas, there are so many applications you can build using the supervised machine learning algorithm, because what it really needs is historic data. So on any topic, if you are trying to find out what's going to happen, and go back to my 3 simple questions: what happened, what will happen, and what to do. So what I'm explaining you is the second problem solving is what will happen. So anything in your studies or anything in your subject matter expertise, if you want to know what will happen, you need to take help of machine learning, and then a branch of machine learning which is supervised machine learning. You can do classification and you can do forecasting on a scale of time. So when I put this hotel data with additional variables from around it, put it into supervised machine learning algorithm, it will tell me that the occupancy of this hotel on May would be 75%, in June 75%, July 60%, August 80%. So this is telling me what will happen. I don't want to go on today's session because it may take a lot of time. And by the way, I'm very passionate of these topics. I can go on for a whole day. But the next level of complexity comes in AI is once I know this, what will happen, what to do. Because just telling the patient saying that you probably may get this disease is not sufficient. We need to tell them the diagnostics and the solution also. So similarly, in the general business areas, if I take hotel as an example, telling the hotel owner that your hotel is going to be 75% occupied doesn't really make sense. I should then recommend something saying that your rate should go up or your rate should go down or etc.
So
So now,
just can I interrupt, Anand?
yes, please.
Yeah. So Anand, in the previous slide, if you go back to your yellow slide, So when you think about training data, I mean, I'm thinking about, let's say, data, for a particular, drug levels as such. Let's say we are giving remdesivir for 1,000 patients, and you want to predict how it is going to have effect in a children population and stuff like that, and we are trying to correlate that with the biomarker data. So wouldn't I mean rather than just so I'm trying to wrap my head around. So is within supervised learning also we will need to tell the program as such to what are the causative factors, which are the covariates as such, what is influencing what, to get some kind of a decent prediction. And then is that so the case, or you're saying that the machine itself will try to find association and see what is the best predictive? Can you put some light on that?
Yes. So, Dr. Said, what you said both is true. Now, when I'm saying both is true, I'm seeing my internet is unstable. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you perfectly.
So the first is, as you said, do I need to tell the machine? I'm again simplifying your question to in a normal software and English words, not using the pharmaceutical words. Is what you're saying is that I have now 1,000 columns in my data, and out of 1,000 column, do I need to tell the machine saying that column number 2, column number 10, column number 15 are important things, or this is what I feel is important? So yes, traditionally, because machine learning is not new, and most of us have used machine learning from last 2 decades or so. And in that cases, when the machine learning was not that sophisticated, that was important input. But what happened is that started bringing the human bias. So taking your example, if you are a research student and I am a research student on the same data, you and me may look at it differently, and we may bring human bias into machine learning. And that's where most of the machine learning programs didn't take off, because the human biases came saying that I'm choosing this variable. Because Dr. Said, again, I can go into the details, but statistically, what is not correct is the theory of elimination. We were taught in the school that the more the variables, the better the prediction. But when we came into the practice, we first did is we eliminated variables because this is not important, that is not important, and I bought the human bias. But what you are saying is also correct, that yes, sometimes you may have to tell the machine that these are important. But in the same breath, I will tell you that what you said as a second is now the most modern technologies in the market, where you don't need to tell the machine what is important and what is not. And that in the statistical branch, it's called stochastic processes, where it is a non-parametric. You are not telling machine what is important because you don't want to bring the human biases, because the algorithms are so sophisticated that it will find its own correlation. Now, Dr. said in this also there are two words, correlation and causal relation. The human brain typically works on causal relations and not correlation, because what we say that okay, you may got COVID because you went and got infected here, so it's a cause we typically try to find out. Machines are good in finding correlations. So now answering again your question in a longish way, you can do both. You can tell the machine which are important variables, but the most advanced algorithms now don't need to be told that, and those are most promising algorithms for professionals like you. Let machine tell you, then you can put your causal saying okay, now machine is telling me correct or not, or is it really pattern, because there are lots of nuances in data which human brain cannot understand, which machines now are able to understand. Did I answer your question? I'm not doing justice because of the time, but I hope I
Correct, correct.
answered.
Yeah, absolutely well. Yes, yes. I think you can move ahead.
Great. So where I was heading is that a third, this second branch of the unsupervised learning. And again, as I mentioned to you, there are a number of branches like supervised learning into unsupervised learning. And again, you can search these examples on Google. You will get lots of open source algorithms here in terms of how you do clustering. And Dr. Said, you had asked question that is it for building hypothesis. So yes, you can do hierarchical clustering. You can do mixture models, and you can do all sorts of this unsupervised machine learning. But these are the four main unsupervised learning types in the technology. Just to give you now similarly example as I gave you earlier, and I will take now a little different example, that I do have now number of beverage bottles, okay, and a number of bottles which I don't know what are those. It is in warehouse. I have in millions, And I really know this input data because I have built now a database of all these bottles, because I have read the labels and I have entered the specifications, like this is a yellow bottle, this is a green bottle, this is a red bottle, this may be medicines, this may be beverages, this may be alcoholic, non-alcoholic. So it can be number of things it can have. So I just take that data and I'm not really sure what I'm looking for that data. So I took that data and I put that into an unsupervised learning algorithm. Again, reminding you is that unsupervised algorithm is the one which has input but doesn't know what output we are looking for. In earlier two use cases which I told you, we knew that I'm looking for whether this hotel will be booked or not, classification, and I'm looking for whether this hotel will be booked over a month or not, which is a time series prediction, which is typically called forecasting. But here I don't know what I'm looking for. So when I put this data of all the specifications, the system will spit out saying that these are the clusters of the bottle. These are the similar types of beverages. These are similar types of content. And I'm going to get this output from the answer. Again, I'm giving you very, very basic and very simple example just to understand. But I'm really encouraging that think about applications in your industry and your area. You can put tons of data into the system, and then system can cluster it. And as you rightly said, we can build now hypotheses, you can build correlations. Once you group the data, then you can just take the one group and then go to supervised machine learning and do fun things with that. The third branch, which I talked about, reinforcement learning, which again, you guys must have heard the buzzword in the market that people also call it as a deep learning, because in the reinforcement learning, I can do feedback through human, which I gave you example of dog and cat images, or whether you see a cancerous cell in an image or not, and etc. But how this is being really used in the market, and without going into again too much of technology jargons, but there are neural networks. And why I'm covering this, because in your studies or in your presentations or when you hear in the market, you hear these words in terms of what are the technologies being used in healthcare, is the convolutional neural network, and then the recurrent neural network, which is basically branches of reinforcement learning, that you are taking data and then that data keeps studying it and keep giving you feedback and provides you multi-layer output. So image processing, audio processing are the typical applications used for this. And again, lots of core healthcare applications which you may have studied during last 1 week are really used in using deep learning, particularly in oncology or in cancer research. These deep learning technologies are used to find the problem solving in that industry. We have 15 more minutes to go, and I'm going to cover a few things and then we'll open it up for question answer. But taking the next step is just to remind you again on what is AI and how I divide those into 5 branches. And if you start doing this, this subject will become very interesting and simple for you. Is that it is robotics, autonomous vehicle, computer vision, natural language processing, and machine learning. Again, machine learning is the most biggest branch which uses machine learning into practically the remaining 4 branches, but there are different applications in machine learning for the drug, pharma, and healthcare. The most important is supervised and unsupervised machine learning, and a combination of deep learning which goes into deeper healthcare applications. So with this general basics of the technology and what AI is, I thought of covering 3 different use cases for you, which are again related to healthcare. And personally, these use cases are developed by me and my team, and we have deployed it in real applications. And I want again you guys to step out of the core drug research or on the healthcare core applications which you studied and see what is possible based on these 5 branches which I told you. So the first is, and I'll not go into the animation, but this is a very interesting challenge we are solving in India. And I'm sure you all pharmacists would be very happy that one serious problem in India is that the drug distribution is not organized like in United States with CVS Pharma and etc. So the drug stores or the pharmacist create handwritten image order every day evening. Again, some of you may be having even pharmaceutical stores. We now launched an app where you can take the image of that. You don't need to type anything. You take that handwritten notebook image, goes to a platform. We have deployed algorithms and AI where that image gets converted into text. The text, missing text into those drug names gets prediction through supervised learning, because what we have done is we have trained supervised learning algorithm with all possible drug names in the market. So if I am even putting one word, like in Google search, when you start typing, it automatically gives you guidance. So similarly here, we have built a whole application where all the drug names are put in there. It understands which is the drug being ordered, and then it goes to the distributor for supply. So now the drug distribution in India can be really streamlined using AI in a very unorganized sector. And again, I don't need to explain you all the problem with the pharmacies in our neighborhood areas in India. They are very small. They don't have infrastructure, and this technology really helps now them to organize their ordering system with inclusion of the natural language processing. That they can also do it with speech and text. They can do it through WhatsApp. In fact, we have made it so easy that you can just press your button and take a photo of your book in which you are saying what drugs I want to order in my store today. And this entire process is enabled by AI, solving a big challenge in the Indian market. The next similar use case is in Japan. Okay, as we know that a lot of adult care or where elderly care facilities, they have serious challenges of staff and nursing professionals and etc. So this is just a first image. I'm showing it to you as academic, and I have not covered this subject into my presentation. Is the IoT or Internet of Things, which I'm sure you all are aware of, that you can put now lots of sensors, you can put cameras, you can put IoT devices to capture the data. So in elder care facility in Japan, what we do is that we have all these sensing devices put around the bed, including the wearables on the patient. But once we have all this data, through the, again, I want to use the word supervised machine learning, what we are doing now is we are doing tons of prediction on that patient. We can know the bed behavior of that patient on the bed. So I can actually predict and tell the nursing staff in an alert saying that room number 123, patient number 7 is likely to fall at 90% probability. Or we can, there's a lot of issue about the heat stroke in Japan during the summertime. Same issue maybe in India also, but we can now predict who is going to get heat stroke. We can predict that which patient is going to wake up at what time. Now, again, I want to make this simple, that go back to the supervised machine learning concepts I taught you, that if I take the training data of 1,000, 10,000, 50,000 patients, at what time they wake up, at what time they go to bed, with those, through these sensors, I can collect the data and send an alert to a patient. Because most of the, in Japanese elder care, we found that the most of the injuries are the patients are not confident of contacting the nurses, and they feel guilty, so they get up from the bed and they fall and then they get fracture, etc. So number of predictions we are doing using this IoT data, and solving very interesting challenges which in the healthcare are very, very useful, where these adult care facilities are now able to manage this with less staff, manage it very effectively, provide better patient service. We can predict their behaviors, we can predict their oxygen levels. So again, go back to those three questions. I want to remind that what I made simple is what happened is captured through all these sensors. What I'm doing through the supervised machine learning algorithm is telling what will happen, and then the nurses are taking care in terms of what to do. If somebody is going to wake up at 2 a.m., then the nurses know that I need to be nearby that bed because this patient is likely to get up at 2 a.m. And maybe arrange for a glass of water or arrange a bathroom visit or etc. So that's the second interesting non-clinical use case. And third, and I'm just covering three, is a very interesting challenge, which is mostly in United States, but I'm sure it is catching up in India, is that the large hospital operation theaters are very expensive. I'm sharing with you the data of one of our customer where their operation theater cost is $200 a minute. I'm again repeating, $200 a minute. And in spite of the sophistication which they have, the way they book the rooms is really in the slots of 2 hours. So they will give 2 hours to Dr. Said, 2 hours to Anand, 2 hours to XYZ doctor. And then if those 2 hours, either I will consume for that patient or I may exceed my time. As you all can know that the operation can finish in 20 minutes or operation can finish in 1 hour, 20 minutes. So if I have the 2 hour block, the next patient and the next doctor is booked only after 2 hours. So that is really causes them a lot of expenses, and if they exceed the time, The next patient may be already in anesthesia, and the relatives of the patient are really nervous. The doctor is waiting, and the first surgery is not over. So we have taken now more than 500,000 records of all that hospital, fed it into the supervised machine learning algorithm. We know how much time it was taken in the past for that type of surgery. So now anytime the new patient gets registered, the system automatically predicts that this patient is likely to take now 20 minutes for this surgery at 90% probability. So based on that, now the hospital can manage the slots for the doctors more effectively, saving millions of dollars in usage of the operation theaters. Also creates a lot of issues, solves a lot of issues on the patient and the relatives and the doctor side. So these are three simple use cases. With that, I really want to finish my topic to give you 10 minutes if you guys have any question, and any comments. If you have any of the content, I can also, since I'm talking, add in what I said. So Dr. Said, with your permission, I'll stop sharing the screen and open up for question answer if any.
Sure. Great. Uh, Amit has raised his hand. He wanted to question. Amit, you can unmute yourself and speak.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Said. It was a really nice section, sir. So I just wanted to ask, like, one of your application, one of the use case where you develop an app. So what was there might be so you have successfully developed an app. So what was a major difficulty you faced while developing that app for specifically for healthcare? So we would like to know something from you on the difficulties which you face.
So, Amit, if I understand your question right, is that difficulties are for in typical software development, there are lots of different.
I mean to say in terms of data coverage, data normalization, because when you have a drug data with you, data normalization becomes a very big one of the difficulties. So, what are the other difficulties, or was this the one of the difficulties you have faced?
Yeah, so Amit, in this particular example, the biggest difficulty we had is about the handwritten content, because I again went very fast to accommodate this content in less than 1 hour. But let's get into a little more detail on the use case. As you know, all the pharmacists in India, the small pharmacist and we have all in millions, right? So yeah, I'm a pharmacist in the store. At the end of the day, what I do is I take inventory of my drugs in my store, and then I say I need to reorder this, and this. And I make list of 5 or 6 drugs. I need to place the order to my drug seller or etc. Now, if I do that, most of these pharmacies they write in handwriting, and you can know that the handwriting can be sometimes in vernacular language. It can be combination of English and Hindi and English, or it can be many combinations. So one of the most difficulty so data normalization is a very common problem in any of the AI applications. So you got that right. But since you asked question about this particular use case was the handwritten text, and how do AI read that handwritten text and does the matching behind the scene automatically with the drug data we had? Because the drug data normalization, yes, we had those issues, but many of those can be solved as a one time, whereas every image coming to us on a daily basis can be totally new that, and we never may have had that in the past. So that was the biggest challenge on that application.
Okay, so you tried to solve this problem from image processing point of view.
Correct.
Yeah.
Image processing plus the optical character. So if I go to in the image processing branch, there are two main branches: optical character reader and intelligent character reader. So in this case is an intelligent character reader, because optical character reader is typically used on a typewritten text. In this case, it is a handwritten, so it needs intelligent character processing. So yes, image processing is the main challenge in this application.
So my second question would be related to NLP. Do you really think that NLP really has a good feature in healthcare industry?
Huge, and that's again what happened is that the core healthcare industry focused on the clinical areas, and therefore me and my company we decided, because it needs tremendous healthcare expertise and we don't possess that, so we focused on the quote unquote non-clinical. These are again innovate clinical areas, but not the core healthcare. I'm not doing any diagnostics, or I'm not taking patient data, etc. But Amit, there are number of applications on natural language processing. Means if I start listing down, there can be dozens. And I encourage, if any one of you have interest in that area, to look at it. It's very, yes, there is a lot of promise in it. Like take mental care, right? You have helplines and suicidal helplines and etc. and you know that there is a lack of staff or lack of humans attending to those calls or attending to those types of, so you can bring now robotics and natural language processing where people will not even come to know that you are talking to a machine and not human. The technology has advanced to that level.
Thank you, sir.
So Anand, essentially, so one thing, when you talk about AI, and this is a more of a broader philosophical question, essentially for you, and so someone who's looking AI from a very, on a very high level as such, as well as more of a technical level. There's a whole talk about, machine learning over a period of time. There are biases that gets inbuilt into it, and obviously, there are consequences for that. Something like, your application, if you're if you're a person coming from XYZ place, your automated your application for a bank loan is high probability that it will get rejected because the machine is sensing that probably you will be a defaulter, kind of thing. This is just an example. How do you see that playing out essentially, and how that can be rectified?
So, Dr. Said, that is a new branch evolving into AI, which is typically now defined as ethics in AI or explainability in AI.
Okay.
Because, as you rightly said, and you took the banking application, but there are even very serious implications in healthcare, right?
Right.
If I just depend on the machine, and for example, if there is any error or if there is any biases, as the word you used, the diagnostic may be totally wrong, and it may lead to some serious consequences. So the data scientists like us are now calling the branch as the explainability of AI. So let me go back to the simple examples which I gave you. That if I'm telling that this hotel will be booked for next 2 months at 75% occupancy, and I'm taking general application just as an example, I need to even know why it is saying that 75%. So the algorithms now have gone to a level where it will tell you that I'm saying that this hotel will be booked 75% in the month of June because variable number 2, variable number 7, and variable number 10. And that level of sophistication have now come into AI, which is now called a branch as a explainability of AI. So when I'm rejecting a loan, or I'm adopting a loan, or I'm diagnosing some disease, the machine now can tell from the supervised machine learning that these features or these columns or these variables were taken into consideration while prediction. And
Okay.
that way, then the humans can take decisions which are well informed decisions.
Okay, so that doesn't becomes a really a true black box essentially. It becomes fairly
Correct.
personal.
Correct.
Great.
But that is now a very special branch, and particularly in healthcare, and I encourage all you to get into that area, is the explainability of AI. So it's not just about developing AI, but explaining it. And it's a very good question that but it is now prevalent, and the technology is geared up to that level to explain what happened.
Mr. Madhuri Gaikwad is asking if students want to really pursue career in AI. So, and being from non-engineering core background, what are the things they need to focus on essentially?
Although it's a very interesting question, and the way I use typically a quote from IBM chairman Ginny Rometty. She wrote to President Trump when he got elected in his first term, very first day, and she said that what IBM type of company needs is not the blue collar job people or the white collar job. It needs a new collar job people. So I would like to use that quote, Madhuri, to answer your question. Is that you really don't need quote unquote technology background to get into AI. What you really need is this new collar skills, and the new collar skills is basically the data is a new oil, data is a new currency, data is a new whatever you want to call it as. It's very important. And then once you know that data, and once you know that what are the applications you are looking for, it's now very common that non-technical people can excel into the area of AI. But you definitely need to know data and basic things. And plus, unfortunately, the whole world and the education system has not caught up to have these courses in the classrooms. But I think I really applaud Dr. Saeed's this initiative, and why I decided to join, because I am very passionate in spreading this knowledge and developing the skill. And therefore, even just to give you some, I'm not, is my company, I decided to set up a development center in a place named Aurangabad.
Yeah,
Okay,
Chikotana, I saw that.
yeah, so which has nobody will say that AI development can happen in that town, but I said I'm going to take students from that area. I'm going to develop world class AI solutions from a smaller
Fantastic.
city,
Fantastic.
and not go to Hyderabad and Mumbai and Bangalore and Pune. And that's what. So Madhuri, yes, you all can learn. Those who are non-technical can get into AI. This is the future. Data is what is going to really make your careers and our lives easy.
Yeah.
So it's a very welcoming field for
So,
everybody.
so that that I'm really tempted based on your answer to ask another follow-up question that I had in mind when I looked at your bio and CV. So coming from a place like Ambo Jogoi all the way to a place where SoftBank comes to you and say, Anand, this is something that we really want to invest in. I know SoftBank will not go any other places if they're really not convinced. What has your been core mantra for all these years in this whole journey, and I'm sure that will be very inspiring for the faculty and the students who are listening to it. Can you share that?
So Dr. Said, my story also is a very beaten path story, right? An Indian comes to America and sets up a software company,
Right.
but I generally was not motivated by that, and therefore what I have not done, and why a company like SoftBank, and Dr. Said, it's not only the investment, but world's largest company formed a joint venture with world's smallest company. So we have a joint venture with SoftBank in Japan. So what I did different is that we are not a services company. So typically, the non-resident Indians in America, they will set up a low-cost development center in India and start developing some softwares for some money, or send people in America to at a low-cost jobs in US. What is my dream and where India should really excel, which we have not done well in the IT industry, is we do not have product of our own. So if you see, and again, not criticizing any of these companies, but I'm just taking examples since it's a group of academicians. If you see Infosys, TCS, Satyam, Tech Mahindra, all these companies are multi-billion-dollar, and we call India as a superpower of AI, a superpower of technology. But we do not have a Microsoft, we do not have a Google, we do not have technologies built in India. So my dream, and what we have succeeded in doing in a very limited way, is we are 100% product company. We have developed innovation and product. So whatever I just walked you, so we built a technology called findability platform, which is basically a supervised, unsupervised machine learning natural language processing platform. So product development and innovation is the key, because of which what I could do it in 10 years of very hard work. There could have been an easy way of earning money by just placing people and doing professional services. But creating a product, creating innovation, selling the product is the most tough job. And I adopted that tough job, and therefore I could attract a company like SoftBank.
So your advice to students is what? They say classic Steve Jobs style: follow your passion, do
Absolutely.
what you like to do essentially. But then you have this whole counter argument कि सर जो है नौकरी नहीं तो वहाँ passion नहीं, and all that thing. So now what's your pragmatic piece of advice to these young faculty and the students as such?
So, Dr. Said, I don't want to use the overused word passion. I just want to use the word innovation, because the society is split between firefighting and innovation. And when we talk about job and salary and our living and livelihood, we are talking about firefighting. I think this generation, at least I'm assuming that most of these are young students and young professors, is very blessed that survival is not an issue. Okay, so therefore you should adopt a path of innovation. So it's not passion, it's because everybody has a passion to earn money, make a big career, make a successful. But innovation, and particularly India is poised to do that. Our basic education system helps us in doing it. And Dr. Said, professors like you and leaders like you can make that happen. And particularly schools like yours should be an incubator for innovation. And the student should adopt that path. You should start innovating from age of 17, 18, and you can build your own technologies, companies, and make your career really successful, not just monetarily, but you can contribute into a larger human cause.
Yeah, no, I think I fully agree with you, sir. Essentially, and I think to me essentially, when I look into the next 50 years, 100 years, I think to us it will be a question of survival as such. I mean, those communities in those countries who are not innovating in these information ages, to me essentially, then they'll just end up as passive consumers of things, and that will be the end of things essentially.
Correct. Correct.
Right, and so I think the new culture essentially, as you mentioned rightly, is to develop that ecosystem where students are open to innovate. They don't fear of failures as such. Essentially, our society, we have this inbuilt culture essentially where we don't accept failures as such. So
Right.
then we then put him to students into a conformity mode where ऐसा ही होगा तो accept होगा, इससे बाहर जो है ना the rebels are not kind of accepted in society. And I think essentially those are the ones who go out and disrupt the space that they're working on essentially. So,
and Dr. Said, just to close on that comment is that I just want to let everybody know that you just heard success, but I did fail 80% of the time.
okay.
So it's, as you rightly said, that we need to accept failure as a part of success.
Part of success.
So that I think we need to engrave into all the students from right early age.
Absolutely,
that
absolutely.
Failure is not bad.
Yeah, and I think as educators, I think we have a double responsibility to give them that space of learning essentially, and then tell them that failure is, as you mentioned, is an integral built into what is called a success, and innovation cannot come out unless we get fear. If we are fearful of failure, obviously there's not going to be any innovation coming in essentially, right? Any other question?
I see Vicky Patel raising his hand.
Yes, yes.
I have a question. That is, there is a product of Tata called.
So your voice is not clear.
I want to type it because we are not able to hear.
Sir, you might want to mute your video as such and just have it in audio stream. He's saying thank you, sir, for contribution.
Sir, can you hear me?
Yes, much better. Yes.
Yeah. Sir, there is a Tata Click, which is a product of Tata, which could not succeed. So I just have a question that the reason of AI is behind that, because the Reliance is moreover successful nowadays, and as Amazon on all other, the outsider companies are getting successful for the business, but Tata Click could not succeed. So is there the reason that AI is not there inside that? Or I might be wrong.
I'm not familiar about this failure part of it, but I would not go to that extent of calling something success or failure because of AI, because AI is really a new tool for improving efficiency, improving productivity. And then, as I said, that suppose I have 1 million rows of data on drug or patients, human brain cannot comprehend that data in one stroke. So I'm using technology to understand and come out of the results. AI is going to become a business advantage to practically every businesses on the earth. But this particular example, I don't know, and I'm not enough knowledgeable to call why it failed or succeeded. But I would not go to that extent of calling something failure or success only because of AI, because any failure and success has many contributors and not just one. But yes, AI increasingly is going to be part of our life, and AI is going to be like electricity. Down the line, you just plug in into a power plug and you're going to get AI into practically everything you do it. But I'm not familiar with this particular, but I will say that don't conclude it on AI.
Right. So, sir, in terms of advice for faculty with regards to their research, I think I'm sure you would want them to motivate for a more of an interdisciplinary approach. Fusing, as what you mentioned, looking at AI and what technology can do into what core research are they working as. And sometimes, what happens with academicians and in generally in universities, that what I've seen, because I've seen both corporate, I've worked with Bristol Myers in Princeton and then come over to India. So, we have these academic silos where we think, okay, Dr. Sharik is an expert into XYZ area, and this is what I'm going to work the rest of my life. So that puts it into kind of silos. So what's your recommendation to make it more interdisciplinary, wider approach?
Yeah, and Dr. Said, that's the reason I took a little bit without your permission presentation in a little different track, not going into just telling about the healthcare.
Yes. I like that.
Interdisciplinary is key because again, everything is going to be interdependent now in more.
Right.
So in order for you to do any very interesting AI application on healthcare, you need to know mobile technology. You need to know how 5G works, how machine learning works. So I highly encourage all the professors, and again, I can offer my company, my skills, my team member skills, and our facilities both in Mumbai and Aurangabad. For anyone to do any experiment, we'll be more than happy to collaborate with anyone. But yes, please do interdisciplinary. Let's not get scared about these technologies and that I'm not a software programmer, I'm just a pharmacist. You need to know now each of these areas at least to some extent.
Right.
And you should encourage students to do that same thing. And the professors is the first thing that they must do themselves and then students.
Yeah. So I mean, the idea is to obviously not to become a core engineer and keep spend the rest of life in understanding Python and learning it, but at least to know it to some extent where you are able to ask that question that whether this thing will help me into my core area of working. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah, and Dr. Said, there's a very interesting new terminology coming in the data science world. Is called citizen data scientist.
Okay.
So definitely, I want all the professors on this call to become citizen data scientist.
Okay.
And what is citizen data scientist is I'm not a core data scientist. I may not know R programming and Python programming, but I'm familiar with my domain. I'm familiar with the data in my domain. I'm familiar with the behavior of the data in my domain. So yes, citizen data scientist, I think is a must qualification for all of us on this call,
Absolutely.
including students.
I
Then you can branch out into any specialty as needed. But citizen data scientist is the base now moving ahead.
Right. And that reminds me, and once a couple of years back, this was this in a discussion that we were having with the FDA. We had this whole large data set, and we had these predictive scientists along with us. So it was a very interesting scenario where these doctors were putting up these questions and hypotheses on the data sets. Okay, these are the genes that are overexpressed. Do we see a correlation among them? Are we seeing more correlation in a younger population? So and the visualization and the predictions of data were coming up with new hypotheses as such. So fully agree with you. We don't need to be core programmers as such, but definitely need to know the science behind that a little bit and see what the data, what we can do with that data essentially.
Great. Thank you very much
Thank
for
you so much.
allowing me to join this
It was
august
really a
group of.
pleasure on behalf of all of us here on the call here, including our technical campus and Anjuman Islam, which is India's largest minority organization. Our goal has been to strive and get people like you, or thought leaders, and disseminate that information, and to essentially, start a research conversation amongst all group. So thank you once again on behalf of all of us here. Thank you, sir, for giving your time. It was really a pleasure. It was very inspiring story of yours, honestly speaking. From a place, and I'm close to Aurangabad, and my in-law stays there. I go on and off to Aurangabad. I love that place. It's a very historical, nice, peaceful place. So
Yes.
I have that connections now with you. So thank you so much once again, and hope
Thank you.
we have you, soon once again. Maybe when you fly into India after this whole pandemic comes, we'll have you in person to our campus.
Sure. My honor and my pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And have a good
Thank
night,
you.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Take care. Good night. So, Professor Abu Sufyan, Maria Lal, would you like to have any announcements before we close in?
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Feedback link and the attendance is being released in the chat box. Please fill it up. All the participants are requested to fill it up. Thank you so much. All see you for next session. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.